Number 8. It's bold, by the way, which is exciting. So not having a shareholder agreement, buy-sell agreement. And I know we talked about the funding component of the buy-sell agreement, but let's put that aside for a minute. The funding component of it. What is the significance of having or not having a shareholders agreement in a business?
Well, I mean, not having it, one, exposes you to potential lots of litigation amongst either former spouses. It could be litigation amongst the partners. Who's going to take control of the shares if someone passes away? How are the shares divvied up? How do you buy them back? So one, I think it opens yourself up to a lot of legal issues because there's nothing dictating who has what rights. So I think that is a big issue. There could be tax issues too if the agreement is not structured correctly. Hit a little brain freezer, if you will.
All right, let me jump in now. So, bottom line here, you mentioned some really good points. Actually, The bottom line here is that if you don't have a shareholders agreement, you don't have your own body of law for governing the company. You're deferring to the statute to fill in the gap. And if it's 608 for LLCs or 607 for corporations, there's a lot of bedtime reading to put you to bed on all the gap filler. You're not gonna like the gap filler. Okay, you're not. There's a couple things in there that are nice, but for the most part, it's not very good. And so that's why you want to have the agreement memorialized in writing, understood by the partners. That's like the bigger picture.
Like, how do you, the rules that dictate, okay, what's the, what procedures are there if you do need to vote a partner out, or, what's the procedures for bringing a partner in? How do they buy in, equity? How do they do that? Is it done through an installment purchase? Do they need cash up front? There's all sorts of things that, at least on the front end and the back end, that need to be addressed.
Well, you raise a good point that, if you don't have an agreement, there's an issue of ownership, and it's less of an issue, I think, for a C Corp or S Corp, because you probably got your tax returns to back up ownership. I mean, you can't say that the ownership is different than what you filed on your federal tax returns. That's a whole other bag of chips. But LLCs can be changed every year. You can change your ownership. You can change your allocations of profits, losses, distributions. So that's subject to interpretation. But when it comes to ownership, control, management, meetings, allocations, who's working in the business, who's not, who has the rights to tell people they can't work. Those are issues. I would say in parentheses right here, we have, I think, what I would call very important issues, and I think that you were going to touch on them as well. In the event of disability and death, what happens if you're in a partnership or you have a business and your partner becomes disabled? Well, hopefully you have a disability policy to kick in, so that this person who's disabled can have money to help them live. But if not,
and to add to that, do you have the right disability policy in place? Because I've seen times where the wrong contract language is in that policy, and that's what people don't understand, is that a disability policy is nothing more than an employment contract in the scenario that you can't work, and the language in those policies will dictate what your income is going forward. And I've seen what happens when you have the wrong language. I've seen, from a personal story where I had a family member who got bought out of the business, and his benefits stopped after 2 years because it was the wrong language in the policy. And so it's really important to make sure that you're consulting with a professional who understands the contractual nuances of these vehicles that we've mentioned about, the legal entities we've mentioned, because there are nuances to all of them.
I would add to that, and I added it onto our list, but I think it's an important one. The people, they shop for insurance, and they get They usually shop on price, and they usually get exactly what they pay for, and that they have no idea what they're getting. They don't read the policies. Find me somebody who's read their policy, and I will take them to lunch. That doesn't happen. And frankly, I haven't even half my policies. People don't do it. They do it. They buy it on price. They don't even know what they're covered for. And when push comes to shove and there's a claim, you're rolling the dice on whether or not that claim is going to be covered. And your agent, if you're not working with a professional, they sold you what they sold you. They don't know what you need. So that's a concept I think we need to explore together. But going back to disability, and death of a business, business owner, we're talking about providing for the departing member to make sure that they can survive in a meaningful and with honor. Also, not dragging the business down because you're down a person. You're down a person, and if you have to keep paying that person, you're not going to be able to, fill that need, that role.
And we talk about also how do you, if you have, because if that person's a partner, they're also likely a key person in the business. Well, all of a sudden you now have to replace that person. So how do you do that without also running the business dry? So there's ways, different key man type stuff where to provide the funds for the business to be able to go out and find the replacement for that partner and another expert in that area.
Yeah. So say, for example, you have 3 partners and one goes down. That person still owns their 33%. There's nothing you're going to do about that without an agreement.
Right.
They're going to be either disabled at home and working on their life, but they're still a partner. And so while you're, busting your ass in your business, when you make distributions to partners, they're getting a third, whether you like it or not. There's no way around it. The only way around that is to give salaries to people, and that means more taxes. And that gets complicated, and it gets kind of into a quasi-ethical situation. So take, for example, the person passes away. Okay, well, there's now an estate that has to be involved with respect to that person. That's where I come in next time, talking about, estate planning and probate. You don't want an estate, by the way. You do not want an estate involved in your business. But take, for example, you have an estate, some person passed away. You have beneficiaries now that are going to become your partners. You now have new partners. Hello, my name is John, and I'm your partner. I know nothing about your business, but I'm really excited to get to know how things work. And
what other partner you don't want, just like Uncle Sam?
There's 3. There's Uncle Sam. There's 4. There's Uncle Sam. There's spouse. There's heirs. And there's creditors in bankruptcy, which is the next thing I was going to get at. So partner files for bankruptcy. Creditors come in. They horse trade. Eventually, you're in partners with their creditor who wants nothing to do with your business but to sell it, to get their money back. And now now you have a series of creditors that are your owners. You have no protection and control over this issue without the proper agreement, whether it's divorce, death, bankruptcy, disability. These are issues that will blow up your business and really distract you from your focus of what you are trying to do with your business. And the cost benefit of planning around it from the beginning versus addressing it later when it's an issue is night and day. It's just I want to shake people.
A lot more expensive to address on the back end, that's for sure.
And we're happy to do it. We'll make a ton more money. We'll help you through the process. We'll give you the support you need, but you're going to pay us exponentially more to deal with this problem later than you will up front. But this is what goes into the agreements, and that's why it's really important, among many other things. So I'm actually looking at
right. A lot of times people go into business with a friend or a family member and think they don't need one of these agreements in place because they trust the person unquestionably. Trust is that trust becomes a weird thing when the business goes from being worth nothing to being worth $20 million, and there's money behind people's motivations. You need to have these agreements in place because things do go wrong.
I have business interests. I'm very entrepreneurial, business-minded. I have a lot of business I'm involved in as general counsel and advisor. And I've experienced that issue personally where a very close friend of mine, we trusted, we went in 50-50 and we had an agreement, but it wasn't enough for the issues that we came up with. It's just sometimes they're not enough, but I've experienced it. And it's a problem, and if you don't have an agreement, it's going to blow up even worse. So I can share more about those, experiences that I've had with my businesses and how I can, give that insight to my clients that I work with to help save them the trouble. So anything else to share about not having a shareholders agreement in your mind.
Yeah, don't make that mistake.
Don't make that mistake. I guess I would just add one more thing to that would be, it's not just about, death, disability, bankruptcy, or
it could be, hey, someone wants to retire from the business.
I should add that retirement. What if a partner wants to sell to their neighbor, for $1 million or for $1? There needs to be a mechanism in place to, again, keep it in the family, so to speak. That's called a right of first refusal. You'll see that very commonly in agreements. There's also management and who's going to be in control, who's not in control. There's liquidation. There's allocations of profits and losses. These agreements, if they're done right, they're fairly long, but they're comprehensive. And they're the kind of thing where, like, you do it in the beginning when everybody's excited. When everybody's really excited, they're optimistic, they're going to make $1 zillion, they're going to be the next Google. You put it on paper, you put it in the drawer, and you hopefully never have to look at it again.
Haimo.